Welcome to Cities on the Move. I'm your host, Stephanie Passingham. Bucky Legrad is a determined cap collector. He has thousands of caps that have earned him a place in the Guinness Book of World Records. We find out what makes him so fascinated with caps. Ken Brown and Tim Geisler join us to talk about the goals of the Southeast Minnesota Rail Alliance, and Julie Schrader gives us a tour of the Betsy and Tacey homes of the fictional characters in Maud Hart Lovelace's beloved book series. Stay tuned for Cities on the Move. Bucky Legrad had a few caps in his closet. Now he has thousands of caps in semi-trailers in his backyard. Let's find out more about this record holder.
My name is Bucky Legrad, and I live over at Frost, Minnesota. I have lived in Frost all my life, and I served a couple months in the Army and a little time in college, and then I got drafted. But other than that, where I live is where I was born, and that's where I work. I got interested in caps in about 1970. Like a lot of people, you open up the closet and up on the shelf there's a dozen different colors of caps, and there was red, blue, blacks, yellow, whatever, and it looked very, very pretty. And so I said to myself, Bucky, I'm wondering what it would be like to be a cap collector. Well, the caps that kind of got my interest is the fact that I am a farmer and I also sell livestock equipment. And so most of the caps were ag-related back in the 70s. And when I started collecting caps, I wanted 1,000 caps. That was kind of my goal. And then pretty soon we got more caps and more caps. And it got to be 2,000. And when they got up around 45, 50,000, then Bucky said, you know, it's time for Bucky to get serious about this Guinness Book of Record thing. We decided in April of 2006 to take these two semi-trailers out to the Corn Palace in Mitchell, South Dakota. We opened up every box, we counted every cap, we made sure there was 24 in every box, then we autographed or signed the box. We had a line about 10 feet wide and 7 feet high and about 100 feet long across the stage out at the Corn Palace. And when all was said and done, we come up with 82,792 caps. We sent it over to the Guinness Book of Records in London, England, and that was in April. And then in October, we got the certificate that said, congratulations, you are now the world's largest cap collection in the Guinness Book of Records. People ask me, Bucky, what is the most important cap that you have that you love the most? And this cap is the one that probably is the one that means the most to me, and that is, we had a lady back in Frost, Minnesota, whose son-in-law was in the government over in Bangladesh, Bangkok. And before he came back, she wrote him a letter, and she said, if it's possible, would you kindly bring a cap back for Bucky for his collection? I love to go out and share my hobby with others. I maintain that everybody in life should have a hobby, whether it's caps, whether it's matchbooks, or whether it's toothpicks. You know, everybody should have a hobby because it's mind therapy, and it just gives you something besides the regular schedule to think about.
Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about the rail, and we have a couple of special guests with us today who are going to talk about the Southeast Minnesota Rail Alliance. We have Tim Geisler. Thanks for joining us. And we have Ken Brown, who is an Olmsted County Commissioner. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. Thanks for having us.
We're going to start with you, Tim. Tell us a little bit about this Southeast Minnesota Rail Alliance. Who are they?
Sure. Well, thank you for letting us come on your show today. We appreciate the opportunity to share what our vision is and what we're trying to accomplish, not just for Rochester, but for all of Southeast Minnesota.
Okay.
The Southeast Minnesota Rail Alliance is a consortium of the Mayo Clinic, Olmsted County, City of Rochester, and the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce. And our goal is to ensure the economic vitality, the accessibility, and safety of transportation issues within Southeast Minnesota. So we want to make sure that this region has the transportation infrastructure it needs to continue to be an economic driver for the state of Minnesota.
Okay. And how long have you guys been around and had this partnership? Did it start with one or the other, the county, or kind of who initiated this?
Probably goes back to about 1998, and the parties have been the same since then. It goes back to the original DM&E when they were looking to expand and go into the Powder River Basin. That was the initial thrust of the group. It wasn't called Southeast Minnesota Rail Alliance, but those entities have been partners in this debate for 11 or 12 years now.
Okay.
And it's been a real good partnership of those entities along with other members of the community, not just in Rochester, but in Southeast Minnesota. So we've had some support from areas, even from Austin.
Okay, very good.
Correct.
Very good. Help viewers understand a little bit the difference between the types of rail that currently exist in the region and what your group is proposing.
Sure.
The primary emphasis right now is more freight. Passenger rail has not been much of a significant factor in Southeast Minnesota for a long time, outside of the river, which stops at Winona and heads up toward the cities. It's a single Amtrak run. So freight has been the main initiative for decades, and now the world is changing. The focus on cost of energy and moving people. Rail has come back into vogue, so to speak, with the Obama administration. Reinvestment in passenger rail, high-speed passenger rail in particular, seems like a wise thing to do going into the future.
And maybe the easiest way to explain the different types is just use some examples. So if we look at what's happening in Minneapolis right now, the Hiawatha line that connects the Mall of America to downtown Minneapolis is an example of light rail transit. It's trains that run on light rail tracks, not existing heavy rail tracks like you would expect, that takes commuters from one part of a destination to another, so within a city. And then there's commuter lines, and the best example of that is the North Star line that just started up in November that runs between Big Lake to downtown Minneapolis. And that is more on existing freight rail lines, heavier cars, heavier rail, and it's more to bring commuters from the suburbs to the center core of a city.
Okay.
What we're looking at mainly is interregional high-speed rail that would connect Chicago to the Twin Cities through Rochester. So it's a way to move people between interregional economic centers in a way that is competitive with cars and airplanes.
Okay, so it is an option to jumping on the plane. Okay.
Exactly. Much like the rest of the world has been doing for decades. All of Western Europe, Asia now have high-speed trains that run anywhere from 150 to 250 miles an hour. Very efficient, very fast, dedicated corridors, and that's how they've moved people for a long time. And we're getting back into that business, or attempting to, in this country.
And for high-speed rail in our area, would that involve the creation of new rail lines, or can they utilize existing lines, or kind of what's the infrastructure required for implementing high speed?
Both.
If you're talking about the true high-speed rail, 150 miles an hour or more, it takes dedicated track. So you really need to have grade separations and other things so you don't have high-speed trains worrying about traffic interfering with the train. But if you take an incremental approach, if you go less than 110 miles an hour, that can coexist with existing freight lines.
Okay. Is there a threshold where they draw the line between kind of regular rail and
over
high speed?
110.
110?
Is really the break point. And the leap from 110 is up to 150 to 180 miles an hour. That's where you get dedicated corridors, grade separated, and so on.
Okay. Give us a sense of the work that's been accomplished so far by this group to kind of introduce this idea and kind of move it along, and where are you headed next?
Well, what's interesting about the state of Minnesota is we really haven't been in the passenger rail business for a long time. Other states in the Midwest region have been working on this Chicago inter-regional rail hub for 10 to 15 years. And Minnesota was kind of outside of that picture for a long time. So our goal was to just get people interested in what the possibilities are for high-speed passenger rail and passenger rail in the state. And a couple of years ago, the state legislature mandated MnDOT to do a regional or a statewide rail plan that would look at what are the possibilities for passenger rail and improvements of freight rail in the state. So we've been working very closely with them over the last year. They just issued their report last week. It's a draft report that says that passenger rail is definitely going to be the way for travel in the future. We need to make additional investments in freight rail to make sure that we have the right capacity to compete when we look at what's happening with truck traffic, environmental issues, that sort of thing. And they've come up with 3 corridors that they believe are primary phase 1 corridors for the state of Minnesota. Okay. They said that a connection between Chicago and the Twin Cities is probably the keystone. It's what everything else will build off of. And then they're saying that there are 2 regional corridors that are equally important. That is Duluth to the Twin Cities and Rochester to the Twin Cities.
Okay. Now, Olmsted County is growing by leaps and bounds, and development is occurring all over the place. When you look at these corridors, how hard would it be to actually place high-speed rail in kind of the developed area? What kind of steps? I mean, that surely has to be a consideration for the county.
It always is. I mean, whether you're building a road or rail or anything else, when you're looking at building infrastructure, you look at what's the most convenient route, shortest route. And can you stay within right-of-ways of highways, follow the I-90 corridor, for one, if you come up from the river that way, or from the cities down to Rochester, vice versa. You've got a 52 corridor that is reasonably well built up now. There's a major initiative to try to make that a freeway, right? Limited access all the way to the cities. One of the last spots in the state where you have a major outstate metro area that doesn't have that kind of connection. So you look at corridors like that and say, okay, what's my minimal impact to businesses, people's homes, or farms, and say, how can I run the train efficiently and quickly on that kind of corridor? So that's kind of what's being considered. But we don't have a say in all of that. Where it ends up with the federal dollars and MnDOT, they will make the ultimate decision on what the best route is for that.
Okay, so you guys are kind of raising awareness, saying this is something we need to look at, something we need to plan for. Rochester is a natural part of the route. That's primarily what your role is at this point.
Right. When you look at that corridor between the Chicago and the Twin Cities, Rochester is the largest economic center between Madison, Wisconsin, and the Twin Cities. So it only seems natural for us to want to connect what we already have in Rochester with the built-in traveler base. We have a lot of people that come to Rochester every year. I got over 2 million visitors that come to Rochester every year. A lot of those would be potential rail passengers that could really ensure the viability of that line. So once you build a line, you want to make sure there's people there to use it.
Sure.
And with our existing traveler base and the continued growth of the region, we believe that that is a good fit for the plan.
Is there a specific number of people that they say you should have for ridership before something's built, or are those really impossible to gauge?
I'm not aware of succinct guidelines as to what it is, but the studies that we have done, given the speeds that at the low end, you'd look at about 4.4 million passengers that may traverse a route Chicago to the Twin Cities that connected with Rochester. It's a fast-growing area. The entire southeast region feeds into the Rochester economy, and all of us benefit, no matter where we are, from the existence of that. So Austin's availability to move 25 miles or so and catch a train that will get you at 150 miles an hour to Chicago in 4 or 5 hours. Looks like a pretty good deal.
Sure.
And the importance of speed on ridership is so important. That 4.4 million that Ken said, that's at 110 miles an hour top speed. If you get those trains up to 150 miles an hour, you can increase that passenger load to 7.7 million passengers. Wow. So it's a significant difference.
At this stage of the game, are you guys working with other organizations like yours in Wisconsin, in Illinois, to make sure you're all drawing the line in the same fashion?
Yeah, definitely. Tim attends the Midwest Regional Rail Initiative forums. It's 11 states, Tim, or how many?
11 states.
11 states in the Upper Midwest region, and they are all vying for connection and service for high-speed passenger rail. What's the best route to pursue? What's the best phase one interim type? Where do I start? Because you're going to use existing infrastructure as much as possible. And then how do I build it out in the future to achieve those kind of goals?
And we've been very active in the MnDOT process, the Minnesota Department of Transportation process, to put together the statewide rail plan. Because again, this isn't just about one community. This is about what is best for the state of Minnesota. And we're looking at what is best for the region of southeast Minnesota, including Austin, Mankato, Rochester, Winona. And we believe that that Rochester link would benefit the entire region, and it's in the best interest of the state.
Owatonna, et cetera.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned a little bit that that rail is perhaps a competitor of air, but I've also heard that perhaps this link to Rochester could relieve some of the pressure on the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport. Do you see that as a viable, have passengers come down and take the airport out from Rochester?
You bet. I think we have to take the view that says that transportation is an integrated system. So we need airports, we need good highways, and we believe that trains will play an important part in the future. So it's not a matter of competing, it's how do you complement. And when you look at the capacity constraints at Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, and we have additional capacity in Rochester, there's a possibility you could link the two airports. We also know that in the airline industry, short-hop flights are not very profitable. And so if we can take some of those short-haul flights and put them on trains, that will actually improve the operating results of the airline. So it's not about competing for passengers. There's plenty of people that want to travel from one place to the other. It's how do we have a system that can work together so people can get where they want to go.
Right. And the airlines have started to look at their load rates, especially from the smaller towns all over the country, and they're dropping those kind of short-haul routes because of time and expense, a number of people. Yet people still want to travel. So what is the best way to now incorporate that into a broader transportation infrastructure that includes, once again, rail? I mean, we were huge in this country on rail, and we decided to build an interstate system, wonderful interstate system, best in the world, and that's where we put our energy, focus, time, and money over the last 50 years. The world's changing, and it's time to get back on and say rail has a future.
All right. Give us a sense of a timeline. These are big projects that require a lot of coordination among a number of entities. Give us a sense of when people should be sharing their input, how they might do that, and when this might come to fruition.
As Tim said, MnDOT's plan, the statewide rail plan, is now available. They can access it via MnDOT's website, take a look at executive summaries, and delve in as deep as they would like to. Now is the time, because if you're interested, your municipality, your community, your county has an interest, the federal government is in the process of reauthorizing their 6-year infrastructure plan that Mr. Oberstar chairs in the House. And now they're starting to prioritize those projects. These are significant, and their voices, the voices from Minnesota, can be heard very effectively, especially now that we have a statewide rail plan. That's one of the catalytic events that you needed to have happen to compete for those dollars, because a lot of it will be federal investment.
Right.
The answer to that is now. Now is the time to get in contact with your local elected officials, your state elected officials, federal elected officials, and tell them that this is important to us, that it will create economic benefits. So even though it is a long process and an expensive process, the benefits certainly outweigh that investment.
All right. So, folks, if you are at home and you are saying, this sounds like an interesting idea, certainly you can get a hold of these folks at the Southeast Minnesota Rail Alliance, which is the website that you see on your screen, and also feel free to talk to your local elected representatives who are part of this ongoing discussion. Thank you, gentlemen. It's a big project. I wish you all the best, and thanks so much for sharing your information.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, for having us.
All right. Stay tuned for more Cities on the Move. Mankato-born author Maud Hart Lovelace wrote many books, but among the favorites of fans is the Betsy Tacey series. We step back in time and learn about this turn-of-the-century author and her characters.
Life in the sleepy little town of Mankato, Minnesota, around the turn of the previous century is the setting for a series of children's books that have become adored around the world. Centering around the capers of Betsy and Tacey, this series and the life of its author, Maud Hart Lovelace, is being lovingly preserved by the Betsy Tacey Society. Society Director Julie Schrader describes the mission of the Society.
Our mission is to promote and preserve Maud Hart Lovelace's legacy, her work, the childhood homes of the characters. Maud Hart Lovelace was born in Mankato in 1892. Her parents were Thomas and Stella Hart. Her father owned a shoe store in Mankato's Front Street and operated that until he became the Blue Earth County Treasurer in the early 1900s. Life in Mankato at the turn of the century when Maud grew up here was a much simpler time than we know it today, and I think that's part of the fascination and the reason these books are so endearing to people. It's just a simple childhood that I guess people long for. Maud always believed she was born to be a writer. She started writing stories and diaries and poems at a very early age, at age 5 actually. Her mother remembered her asking her how to spell going down the street. So she always believed she would become a writer someday.
And Maud didn't have to wait long to be published.
Maud's father had her poetry published when she was 10 years old. By the age of 18, she had sold her first short story to the Los Angeles Times for $10. Maud's first published novel was in 1926. It was called The Black Angels. She wrote 5 historical novels between that time and about 1937. In 1940 is when she published the first Betsy Tacey book.
The Betsy Tacey series has gained fans around the world. The first book, Betsy Tacey, begins with the new friendship of 2 young girls. After Betsy and Tacey become best friends at Betsy's 5th birthday party, they are inseparable. Betsy is lively and imaginative, invents wonderful games, and can make up stories. Tacey, though bashful with people she doesn't know well, is just as merry as Betsy and is a wonderful companion. Together they picnic, explore, dress up, go calling, and gaze upon a certain chocolate-colored house where they eventually meet a new friend, Tib.
The Betsy Tacey books are pretty much based on Maud's life growing up here in Mankato. So they're basically autobiographical. Although they are fiction, she did, create a lot of the plots, but a lot of the people and places that she wrote about were based on real people. And that book was never intended to be a series, but it became so successful that one book was written every year through 1955.
Many friends and family can find themselves reflected in the Betsy Tacey series.
Maud used herself as the character of Betsy. Her best friend, Vic Kenny, lived across the street, and she is the character of Tacey in the books. Then it's followed by, they meet Tib, who was Midge Gerlach, who lived down the street as well. And then a lot of the other characters are her family, school friends, people in the community.
The Betsy Tacey Society has been successful in convincing HarperCollins to reprint several of the books again. It also works to preserve Maud Hart Lovelace's legacy through archival and historical preservation.
We try to fulfill our mission by promoting the books, first of all. The books when the Betsy Tacey Society was first formed, the books had gone out of print, and that's why it was formed, to lobby HarperCollins to get the books back in print. The Betsy Tacey Society purchased Tacey's house in 1995 when it became available for sale. They started restoration work to the structure, and then in 2001, Betsy's house, Maud's childhood home, became available, and they purchased that. And then restoration work was kind of shifted from Tacey's house to Betsy's house because that house was in need of more structural repairs.
The houses are now open for tours along with a gift shop and a soon-to-be-open interpretive center.
Both homes are open to the public. We're open right now only once a week on Saturdays or by special appointment. We've had the houses open. People can see the progress that we're making. So we do activities here all the time and give tours.
For more information on the Betsy Tacey Society, visit www.betsytaceysociety.org.
Cities on the Move is on the web. Make a comment, ask a question, or share your good idea by visiting our website at ksmq.org.
Chilly temperatures do not deter our hardy residents, as there is much to enjoy throughout the region on the calendar of events. The North Iowa Area Community College presents the next entry in its Travel and Adventure film series. On Friday, January 15th, view Inside Iran Today in the Nyack Auditorium at 7 p.m. Admission is $5 for adults and $3 for students. For more information, visit nyack.edu. The Battle of the Midwest Cheer Competition will be held January 15th and 16th at the Mayo Civic Center Taylor Arena. Competition features teams from 5 years old through high school. For more information, visit uacheer.com. The Mankato Mosaic Theater presents The Mind's Eye on January 22nd and 23rd at Centenary Church. This performance of local talent includes poetry from Sue Chambers and Jen Miller, short plays by Greg Abbott and Hannah Giersdorf, dance by Carrie Tweeten and Luna Helder, music by Ocho and Ryan Lano, short story dramatization by Ann Fee, and much more. It's the troupe's premier show for all ages. For more information, call 507-420-1881. The Frozen River Film Festival will be held in Winona on January 21st through the 31st. This year's theme is food. Enjoy a variety of films, speakers, workshops, and eating opportunities. For more information, visit frff.org. If you have an event you'd like to share with our viewers, log on to our website, ksmq.org, and post your information today. Next week on Cities on the Move, we meet author and draftsman Ken Olson. We visit Jan Stevens of Dundas, Minnesota to learn about historic dressmaking, and Barbara Gunderson joins us to talk about AmeriCorps. Please join us Tuesday, January 19th at 6:30 p.m. on KSMQ for another edition of Cities on the Move. I'm your host, Stephanie Passingham. Good night.
Production of this program is made possible in part through a grant from the Blandon Foundation.